The security alert on my phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m., showing Marissa's Mercedes pulling into our driveway. I was sprawled on our leather couch, nursing a beer and scrolling through claim reports when my wife of 8 years finally decided to come home from another client dinner. She breezed through the front door of our renovated craftsman house, designer heels clicking against the hardwood floors, her blonde hair still perfectly styled despite the late hour. Marissa Turner, luxury real estate stager extraordinaire, never looked anything less than camera ready. "Sorry I'm late, Caleb," she said, not sounding sorry at all. Her voice carried that familiar edge of irritation, as if my mere existence was somehow inconvenient. The Pemberton project ran long. You know how these wealthy clients can be. I looked up from my phone, taking in her appearance. Her lipstick was fresh, her clothes unwrinkled. For someone who'd supposedly been moving furniture and arranging decorative objects for 6 hours, she looked remarkably put together. "Must have been some staging session," I said, my voice flat. "Your makeup looks like you just applied it." Marissa's jaw tightened. She set her purse down on the kitchen counter with more force than necessary. "Are you seriously going to start this again? I told you we had dinner with the clients afterward. It's called maintaining professional relationships, something you might understand if you ever tried to advance your career." There it was, the subtle dig at my job as a commercial insurance adjuster. Not glamorous enough for her tastes, despite the fact that my steady income had helped pay for this house and her expensive wardrobe. "Speaking of professional relationships," she continued, walking over to the mirror in our entryway and checking her reflection, "I saw your brother Sam at the hardware store yesterday. God, he's gotten even better looking. Those arms, that smile." She turned to face me, her eyes scanning my average build with obvious disappointment. "It's honestly amazing how different you two look. He got all the good genes, didn't he?" Quickie, the comment hit exactly where she intended. Sam was 3 years younger, 6 inches taller, and had the kind of natural charisma that made people gravitate toward him. He owned a small construction company and had never lacked for female attention. Growing up, I'd always been Sam's older brother, rather than my own person. "Your brother is so hot," Marissa sighed, shaking her head with theatrical disappointment. "Too bad you look nothing alike." Something cold settled in my chest. 8 years of marriage, and she was comparing me to my brother like I was some disappointing consolation prize. I set down my beer and looked at her directly. "Funny you should mention family comparisons," I said, my voice taking on the tone that usually made her nervous. "Your sister Lana isn't bad either. In fact, she's got quite a few things you don't." Marissa's face went white, then flushed red. "What the hell is that supposed to mean?" I shrugged, enjoying the way her composure cracked. "Just making conversation. You seem to enjoy discussing which family members are more attractive." "Are you sleeping with my sister?" The words exploded out of her. "How dare you even suggest something like that? Lana would never. She's married, she has kids, she—" "Relax," I interrupted. "I'm just pointing out how it feels when your spouse makes those kinds of comments. Not so fun, is it?" But Marissa was past listening. She grabbed a throw pillow from the couch and hurled it at me. "You're disgusting. I can't believe you would even think about Lana that way. She's my sister." "And Sam is my brother, but that didn't stop you from going into detail about his arms." Marissa's mouth opened and closed like a fish. For a moment, I thought she might actually apologize, or at least acknowledge the double standard. Instead, she grabbed her purse and headed for the stairs. "I'm not doing this tonight," she snapped. "Some of us have real work to do tomorrow." She stomped up to our bedroom, and I heard the door slam hard enough to rattle the picture frames in the hallway. I finished my beer in the sudden silence, staring at the security app on my phone. According to the GPS tracker linked to our joint account, Marissa's car had made 3 stops before coming home. The Pemberton house she was supposedly staging, yes, but also the Marriott downtown and a residential address I didn't recognize. Interesting. The next morning, I was loading my travel mug with coffee when Mrs. Graham from next door appeared at our kitchen window. She was 70-something with steel gray hair and an impressive collection of police scanners that she claimed were for emergency preparedness. In reality, Eleanor Graham was the neighborhood's unofficial intelligence network. I opened the back door before she could knock. "Morning, Mrs. Graham. What's the word from the scanner today?" "Oh, Caleb, I'm so glad I caught you." She glanced around conspiratorially, even though we were alone in my backyard. "I hope you don't mind me saying, but I couldn't help noticing some unusual activity yesterday evening." My coffee mug paused halfway to my lips. Unusual how? "Well, I was watering my tomatoes around 6:30 when I saw Marissa leave in her car. Nothing strange about that, of course. But then, around 8, I saw her come back, except she wasn't alone. There was a man with her. Tall fellow, expensive suit, driving one of those Tesla cars. They seemed quite familiar with each other. Mrs. Graham's euphemisms were legendary in the neighborhood. Familiar could mean anything from a friendly handshake to something much more intimate. "Did you recognize him?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Oh yes, I've seen him before. Brentley something or other. He's been around the neighborhood quite a bit lately, always in that flashy car. Claims to be in real estate development." She paused meaningfully. Though from what I observed, he and Marissa weren't discussing property values, if you catch my drift. I caught it. Mrs. Graham had a talent for observing things that others missed, and her observations were rarely wrong. "They were in the house for about an hour," she continued. "Then they left together in his car. Marissa didn't come back until nearly midnight. I only know because the Tesla's headlights swept across my bedroom window when he dropped her off." The timeline matched what I'd seen on the security app. Marissa had been home around 8, left again, and returned just before I got the final alert. "Thanks for letting me know, Mrs. Graham. I appreciate you looking out for us." She patted my arm with genuine sympathy. "You're a good man, Caleb. I just thought you should be aware of what's happening in your own backyard." After she left, I sat in my kitchen staring at my coffee and processing the information. Marissa was having an affair. The signs had been there for weeks. The late nights, the new attention to her appearance, the defensive behavior, and now the outright cruelty about my looks. She was comparing me to other men because she'd found one she preferred. The rational part of my brain told me I should confront her directly, demand the truth, maybe suggest counseling. The rest of me was already planning something else entirely. I pulled out my phone and opened the family tracking app we'd installed for safety purposes. Marissa's location showed her at a downtown address I recognized as one of her staging projects. But according to her calendar, which synced to our shared Google account, she didn't have any appointments until noon. Time to do some investigating. The Pemberton house was a sprawling Victorian in the historic district, the kind of property that attracted wealthy buyers looking for character and prestige. I parked across the street and watched through my windshield as workers carried furniture and decorative pieces inside. Marissa's white Mercedes was in the driveway, along with a silver Tesla Model S that I assumed belonged to Brentley something or other. I'd taken a personal day from work, telling my supervisor that I had a family emergency to handle. It wasn't entirely a lie. After 20 minutes of observation, I decided to take a more direct approach. I crossed the street and walked up to the front door, which stood open to accommodate the workers. The interior was stunning. High ceilings, original hardwood floors, and enough space to house a small army. Marissa was directing the placement of a massive dining room table, her voice carrying that authoritative tone she used with people she considered beneath her. No, not there," she was saying to two burly movers. "It needs to be angled toward the window so buyers can envision entertaining guests while enjoying the garden view." I stepped inside, and Marissa's head snapped up in surprise. For just a moment, I saw something like panic in her eyes before she composed herself. "Caleb, what are you doing here?" "I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd see how the project was going," I said easily. "You seemed pretty stressed about it last night." Before she could respond, a man emerged from what looked like a study or office area. He was exactly as Mrs. Graham had described, tall, well-dressed, with the kind of confident bearing that came from never having to worry about money. His hair was perfectly styled, and his suit probably cost more than I made in a month. "Marissa, darling, I think the desk placement in the office is perfect now." He stopped when he saw me, his smile faltering slightly. "Oh, hello. I don't believe we've met." "This is my husband, Caleb," Marissa said quickly. "Caleb, this is Brent Dale. He's the developer on this project." Brent extended his hand with the kind of firm grip that was meant to establish dominance. "Pleasure to meet you, Caleb. Marissa's told me so much about you." "Funny, she's barely mentioned you at all," I replied, matching his grip and watching his confident smile waver. "Well, I'm sure she has more interesting things to discuss at home than work projects," Brent said with a laugh that sounded forced. I looked around the room, noting the expensive staging elements and the obvious chemistry between my wife and her client. They stood just a little too close, shared glances that lasted a beat too long, and had the comfortable familiarity of people who'd spent significant time together. "This is beautiful work, Marissa," I said. "You've really outdone yourself. How many late nights has this project required?" Her cheeks flushed. "It's been intensive, but Brent appreciates attention to detail." "I'm sure he does." I turned to Brent. "Are you married, Brent?" The question caught him off guard. Yes, actually. My wife Catherine and I have been married for 12 years. Kids? 2 daughters. His discomfort was growing more obvious. "That's wonderful. Family is so important, don't you think? It's terrible when people don't appreciate what they have at home." Marissa shot me a warning look, but I was just getting started. Caleb, I'm sure Brent has other appointments today, she said tightly. Of course. Don't let me keep you from your work. I emphasized the last word just enough to make both of them squirm. I left them standing there and walked back to my car, but instead of driving away, I circled the block and parked where I could still observe the house. 30 minutes later, Marissa and Brent emerged together, got into his Tesla, and drove off in the direction of downtown. According to the tracking app, they were headed toward the Marriott. I had two choices: follow them and confirm what I already suspected, or use the time more productively. I chose the latter. Marissa's home office was in our converted basement, a space she'd claimed as her exclusive domain. I'd respected that boundary throughout our marriage, but extraordinary circumstances called for extraordinary measures. The door was locked, but I knew she kept a spare key in the fake rock near our back patio. Her office was meticulously organized, with fabric samples arranged by color, furniture catalogs stacked in perfect piles, and a corkboard covered with photos of completed projects. Her laptop was password protected, but her filing cabinet wasn't. I started with her client files, looking for anything related to Brent Dale or his development company. What I found was illuminating. The Pemberton project had supposedly started 6 weeks ago, but the paperwork showed it had been ongoing for nearly 4 months. There were receipts for hotel rooms, expensive dinners, and weekend trips to view properties in cities where Brent had no listed developments. Most damning were the handwritten notes in Marissa's planner, appointments marked with B that corresponded to charges on our joint credit card for lingerie, spa treatments, and restaurants we'd never visited together. I photographed everything with my phone, then moved to her desk drawers. In the bottom drawer, hidden under a stack of old magazines, I found a burner phone. It was an older model smartphone, the kind you could buy with cash at any electronics store. I powered it on and scrolled through the message history. The text between Marissa and Brent went back 3 months. They started professionally enough, discussing staging timelines and budget constraints, but they quickly evolved into something else entirely. Flirtation, then explicit planning for meetings, then declarations of love and detailed critiques of their respective spouses. One message from Marissa made me freeze. Caleb is so boring compared to you. He has no ambition, no passion. Sometimes I wonder why I ever married him. He's nothing like his brother Sam. Now there's a man who knows how to take charge. Brent's response was equally charming. You deserve so much better, darling. A woman like you should be worshipped, not taken for granted. When this project is finished, we should think seriously about making some changes. I scrolled through weeks of similar exchanges, each one a small knife twist of betrayal. They'd been planning a future together, discussing how to handle their current spouses, and sharing intimate details about their marriages that made me feel sick. But anger was more useful than nausea. I forwarded the most damaging messages to my personal email, then carefully returned the phone to its hiding place. By the time Marissa returned home that evening, I was back on the couch with a beer, scrolling through insurance claims as if nothing had happened. She walked in with a glow that had nothing to do with professional satisfaction and everything to do with afternoon closeness at the Marriott. Her hair was slightly mussed, despite obvious attempts to fix it, and she was wearing different lipstick than she'd had on that morning. How was the staging? I asked, without looking up from my phone. Productive, she said, avoiding eye contact. Brent is very hands-on with his projects. I'm sure he is. She disappeared upstairs to shower, and I used the time to make copies of all the evidence I'd gathered. Photos, messages, receipts, timeline documentation. Everything went into a secure cloud storage account that only I could access. When Marissa came back downstairs in her robe, she seemed more relaxed, as if the shower had washed away her guilt, along with the smell of another man. I'm sorry about last night, she said, settling onto the couch beside me. I was stressed about the project timeline, and I took it out on you. That wasn't fair. It was a good apology, delivered with apparent sincerity. 3 days ago, I might have accepted it and suggested we order dinner from our favorite restaurant. Instead, I looked at her carefully, noting the way she couldn't quite meet my eyes. Apology accepted, I said. We all say things we don't mean when we're under pressure. She smiled and leaned against my shoulder. I'm lucky to have such an understanding husband. The word husband felt strange coming from her lips, considering she'd been planning to leave me for another woman's husband just hours earlier. But I didn't say anything. I had planning to do, and revenge was a dish best served with proper preparation. That night, after Marissa fell asleep, I sat in my home office and began documenting everything I'd learned. Dates, times, locations, financial records, and photographic evidence. If my wife wanted to play games, she was about to learn that I was much better at them than she'd ever imagined. The next morning brought another visit from Mrs. Graham, who appeared at my kitchen window with the punctuality of a Swiss watch. More scanner activity to report? I asked, opening the door with my coffee in hand. Not exactly, dear, but I did notice that your wife left quite early this morning. 7:30, which is unusual for her. And that Tesla fellow was parked around the corner on Maple Street. I only noticed because my arthritis was acting up and I was awake early. Mrs. Graham's arthritis was remarkably convenient for neighborhood surveillance purposes. They left together? I asked. Oh, yes. She walked right to his car and got in. Very cozy, if you ask me. She paused. I hope I'm not overstepping, Caleb, but as someone who's been married for 47 years, I feel obligated to tell you that this situation isn't going to resolve itself. She was right, of course, but it wasn't going to resolve itself the way Marissa expected either. The Knot was exactly the kind of bar where secrets went to fade. Located in the old warehouse district, it attracted a mix of blue-collar workers, downtown professionals, and neighborhood regulars who treated the place like their personal social club. The bartender, Jake, had been serving drinks there for 15 years and had heard every sob story, confession, and piece of gossip the city had to offer. I'd chosen it carefully for my next move. I arrived at 6:30 on a Friday evening, knowing the after-work crowd would be settling in for the weekend. My friend Jasper was already there, nursing a beer and complaining to anyone who'd listen about his latest construction project. Jasper had worked with my brother Sam for years before starting his own small renovation business, and he knew everyone in our social circle. Caleb, he called out when he saw me. Perfect timing. I was just telling Jake about the nightmare client who wanted me to install a hot tub on the second floor of a house built in 1920. I ordered a beer and settled onto the bar stool next to him. Some people have more money than sense. Speaking of money, Jasper said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, I heard your wife landed that big Pemberton project. Must be nice to have clients with deep pockets. Oh, she's definitely getting well compensated for her time, I said, letting a note of bitterness creep into my voice. Jasper caught the tone immediately. He'd known me for 10 years and could read my moods better than most people. Everything okay at home, buddy? I took a long drink of my beer, as if gathering courage to speak. Can I ask you something, Jazz? If you found out your wife was cheating, what would you do? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Jasper's expression shifted from casual interest to serious concern. Hypothetically? He asked. Not so hypothetically. Jake, who'd been pretending not to listen while wiping down glasses, suddenly became very interested in our conversation. Two other regulars at the end of the bar leaned in slightly. Jesus, Caleb, are you sure? I pulled out my phone and showed him one of the photos I'd taken of the hotel receipts. Marissa's been staging more than houses lately. Her client Brent Dale has very specific requirements for his projects. Jasper studied the receipt, his face darkening. This snake is married, isn't he? 12 years, 2 kids. And Marissa knows this? I showed him a screenshot of one of their text exchanges, carefully edited to remove the most explicit content, but leaving enough to make the situation clear. That's cold, Jake said from behind the bar. Real cold. Word spread through the Knot with the efficiency of a military communication network. By 7 o'clock, half the bar knew that Caleb Turner's wife was having an affair with some rich developer, and by 7:30, they knew his name was Brent Dale and he drove a silver Tesla. I was nursing my second beer when Marissa walked in. She'd clearly dressed for the occasion. Tight jeans, a low-cut blouse, and heels that clicked authoritatively against the wooden floor. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and she wore the kind of makeup that suggested she'd planned this appearance carefully. Behind her was her best friend Ellie, a fellow stager who shared Marissa's taste for drama and expensive accessories. The bar went quiet as they approached. Marissa's eyes swept the room, taking in the hostile stares and whispered conversations before settling on me. Hello, Caleb, she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. I heard you were here telling stories. I took another sip of my beer, not bothering to look at her. Just having a drink with friends, Marissa. Nothing wrong with that. Except when you're spreading lies about your wife to anyone who'll listen. Ellie stepped forward, her face flushed with righteous indignation. How dare you air your dirty laundry in public? Marissa has done nothing but try to build a successful business, and you're sabotaging her out of jealousy. Jasper laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the tension. Jealousy? Lady, you might want to check your facts before you start defending the indefensible. What's that supposed to mean? Ellie demanded. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a manila folder. Inside were printed copies of the hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and selected text messages. I spread them across the bar like playing cards. It means your friend has been billing her extracurricular activities to our joint credit card, I said calmly. 3 months of hotels, dinners, and weekend getaways with Brent Dale, all documented, all time-stamped, all paid for with money she claimed was for business expenses. Marissa's face went white. You went through my private papers? I went through our financial records. Amazing what you can find when you actually look at where your money is going. The bar erupted in murmurs and whispered conversations. Jake leaned forward to examine the receipts, shaking his head in disgust. Several other patrons crowded around to get a better look at the evidence. This is a violation of my privacy, Marissa said, her voice rising. You had no right. I had every right, I interrupted. We're married. Those are joint accounts, and unless I'm mistaken, adultery is still grounds for divorce in this state. Ellie grabbed one of the printed text messages and read it quickly, her expression changing from defiant to uncomfortable. Marissa, what is this? It's taken out of context, Marissa said desperately. Brent and I have a professional relationship. These messages are just friendly banter. I pulled out my phone and opened the audio recording app. Would you like me to play the voicemail he left you yesterday? The one where he talks about how much he enjoyed your private staging session at the Marriott? Marissa lunged for my phone, but Jasper intercepted her. I don't think so, sweetheart. Let the man finish his story. The bar door opened and Brent Dale walked in. He'd clearly come straight from some upscale venue. His suit was immaculate, his hair perfectly styled, and he carried himself with the kind of arrogant confidence that money often provided. He scanned the room until he spotted Marissa, then approached our group with a smile that faltered when he realized he was walking into a hostile environment. Marissa, darling, you said you'd meet me at... He stopped mid-sentence when he saw the papers spread across the bar. What's going on here? Brent Dale, I presume. I stood up and extended my hand. I'm Caleb Turner, Marissa's husband. We've been looking forward to meeting you. Brent's handshake was weak, distracted. His eyes kept darting to the evidence on the bar and the hostile faces surrounding him. This is a private matter, he said, trying to regain his composure. I don't think it's appropriate to discuss business relationships in a public venue. Business relationships? Jake laughed. Is that what we're calling it now? I picked up one of the hotel receipts and held it up for Brent to see. The Marriott charged our credit card $437 for a business meeting last Tuesday afternoon. That's quite an expensive conference room. Brent's face flushed red. Now see here, I don't have to stand for this kind of harassment. You're right, I agreed. You could leave. Go home to your wife, Catherine, and your 2 daughters. I'm sure they'd be very interested in hearing about your business practices. The mention of his family hit like a physical blow. Brent stepped backward, bumping into a table and nearly knocking over someone's drink. How do you know about my family? The same way I know about your weekend trip to Portland last month, your standing reservation at Romano's restaurant, and your habit of using company funds for personal expenses. I smiled pleasantly. Amazing what you can learn when you put your mind to it. Marissa grabbed Brent's arm. We're leaving. This is ridiculous. But Brent was already backing toward the door, his confident facade completely shattered. I have to go. I can't be here. He practically ran out of the bar, leaving Marissa standing alone in front of 30 hostile strangers. Ellie had quietly slipped away during the confrontation, abandoning her friend to face the consequences alone. You bastard, Marissa whispered, tears starting to form in her eyes. You planned this whole thing. I planned to have a drink with my friend, I said. You're the one who decided to make it a public spectacle. She looked around the bar, taking in the judgmental stares and whispered comments. Her carefully constructed image was crumbling in real time, and everyone was watching it happen. This isn't over, she said, grabbing her purse and heading for the door. Yes, it is, I called after her. It's been over for 3 months. You just didn't bother to tell me. After she left, the bar slowly returned to normal conversation levels. Jasper clapped me on the shoulder and ordered another round. That was brutal, man. You okay? I looked at the evidence still spread across the bar, then carefully gathered it back into the folder. I'm better than okay. I'm free. But freedom, I was about to learn, came with its own set of complications. The next morning brought a text message from my brother Sam. Heard about last night. We need to talk. I was sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee and scrolling through the dozens of missed calls and voicemails Marissa had left on my phone. Most were angry, some were pleading, and a few were threats about what she'd do if I didn't stop this nonsense immediately. I ignored them all and called Sam back. Jesus Christ, Caleb, what the hell happened at the knot? His voice carried that mix of concern and excitement that meant he'd already heard multiple versions of the story. Marissa's been cheating on me for 3 months. I found out and made it public knowledge. End of story. That's not what I heard. Word is you ambushed her with some kind of dossier and humiliated her in front of half the neighborhood. Word travels fast. This is a small city, brother, and Marissa called Lana crying at 2 in the morning. Lana called Mom, Mom called me, and now everyone's worried about you. I set down my coffee cup harder than necessary. Everyone's worried about me. That's interesting. Where was all this concern when my wife was screwing around behind my back? Look, I'm not defending what she did. If she cheated, she cheated. But the way you handled it, that's not like you, Caleb. You're the reasonable one, remember? The one who thinks things through? I did think it through, very carefully. There was a pause. What exactly are you planning to do? Before I could answer, my doorbell rang. Through the front window, I could see Brent Dale standing on my porch, looking significantly less polished than he had the night before. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair was mussed, and he had the desperate look of a man whose carefully constructed world was falling apart. I have to go, Sam. Brent Dale is at my front door. Who's Brent Dale? Marissa's boyfriend. I hung up and walked to the front door, taking my time. Brent was pacing on the porch, checking his phone repeatedly and glancing around as if he expected photographers to jump out of the bushes. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. This is a surprise. I thought you'd be halfway to another state by now. We need to talk, he said, trying to project authority despite his obvious distress. This situation has gotten completely out of hand. Has it? I think it's exactly as in hand as it should be. Look, I understand you're upset. What happened between Marissa and me, it wasn't supposed to go this far, but destroying both our reputations isn't going to solve anything. I leaned against the doorframe, studying his face. Up close, I could see the strain of a sleepless night and what looked like the beginnings of a panic attack. Both your reputations? That's interesting phrasing. What exactly did you think was going to happen when you started sleeping with a married woman? It's complicated. Marissa and I, we have a connection. We understand each other in ways that our spouses don't, but we never meant to hurt anyone. Except for the part where you were planning to leave your wives and start over together. I read the text messages, remember? Brent's composure cracked completely. My wife knows. She saw the charges on our credit card and demanded an explanation. I had to tell her everything. And how did that go? She's filing for divorce. She's taking the kids to her mother's house in Boston. 12 years of marriage, gone. His voice broke slightly. My daughters won't even talk to me. I felt a moment of genuine sympathy for his children, who were innocent victims in this mess, but I felt nothing for Brent himself. That's unfortunate, I said, but I'm not sure what you expect me to do about it. I expect you to stop spreading lies about me around town. I have business interests here, employees who depend on me. If my reputation is destroyed, a lot of people will suffer. Then you should have thought about that before you decided to have an affair. Brent's desperation shifted into anger. You self-righteous bastard. You think you're so much better than me, but you're just a small-town insurance adjuster who couldn't keep his wife satisfied. Marissa told me all about your marriage, how boring you are, how you have no ambition. She was miserable with you. The insult was designed to provoke me into a reaction, but I'd heard worse from Marissa herself over the past few months. Instead of anger, I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. Is that what she told you? That's interesting, because according to her text messages, she was planning to take half of everything I own in the divorce and use it to start a new life with you. Doesn't sound like someone who was planning to leave empty-handed. Brent's face went pale. What are you talking about? Check your phone, Brent. I forwarded you some of her messages from last week, the ones where she talks about her strategy for maximizing the divorce settlement. Apparently, she's been documenting my emotional abuse and financial control for months. Very thorough of her. I watched as Brent pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages. His expression shifted from confusion to horror as he read Marissa's detailed plans for extracting as much money as possible from our divorce. She was using you, Brent, the same way she was using me. The only difference is that you were supposed to be her exit strategy, and I was supposed to be her retirement fund. Brent stared at his phone for a long moment, then looked up at me with something approaching desperation. This can't be right. She loves me. She said she'd never been happier. I'm sure she did, right up until the moment she realized her plan was falling apart. I stepped back into my house and started to close the door, but Brent grabbed the frame. Wait, what do you want? Money? I can pay you to keep this quiet. My company has assets, investments. We can work something out. The offer was tempting in its own way, but money had never been my primary motivation. I wanted something much more valuable than cash. I want you to understand something, Brent. You didn't just have an affair with my wife. You helped her plan to destroy my life for your mutual benefit. That's not a mistake or a moment of weakness. That's a calculated attack on everything I've worked for. So what happens now? I smiled, and something in my expression made him take a step backward. Now you get to find out what happens when someone fights back. I closed the door in his face and watched through the window as he stood on my porch for several minutes, staring at his phone and trying to process what he'd learned. Finally, he walked back to his Tesla and drove away, but I had a feeling this wouldn't be our last conversation. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasper. Heard Dale's been driving around town all morning looking for you. What did you do to him? I typed back, gave him some reading material. The response came immediately. You're enjoying this way too much. He wasn't wrong. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my own life. Marissa and Brent had made their choices, and now they were going to live with the consequences. But as I was about to learn, they weren't planning to go down without a fight. That evening, I was grilling a steak on my back patio when I heard voices in the front yard. I walked around the side of the house and saw Marissa standing in my driveway with her sister Lana and Sam. They were clearly in the middle of some kind of intervention planning session. Completely out of character for him, Lana was saying. Caleb's always been the stable one. This vindictive behavior is it's not like him at all. Maybe that's the problem, Sam replied. Maybe he's been too stable, too willing to let things slide. Sometimes a man has to stand up for himself. Marissa spotted me before I could retreat. Caleb, we need to talk, all of us. I walked over to the group, noting the way they'd positioned themselves in a semicircle, as if they were planning to stage an intervention. This looks serious, I said. Should I call a lawyer? This isn't a joke, Lana snapped. Your wife is devastated. She made a mistake, yes, but the way you're handling it is cruel and vindictive. I looked at Marissa, who was wearing the kind of outfit designed to remind me of what I was supposedly giving up, a sundress that showed off her figure, perfect makeup, and an expression of wounded vulnerability. A mistake? I repeated. That's what we're calling 3 months of premeditated adultery now? It wasn't premeditated, Marissa said, tears starting to form in her eyes. It just happened. Brent and I connected professionally and things evolved. I never meant for it to go as far as it did. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to one of her text messages. Would you like me to read the one where you talk about finding the right lawyer to maximize your divorce settlement? Or the one where you discuss the best strategy for claiming I was emotionally abusive? Sam stepped forward. Caleb, man, you're better than this. Whatever she did, airing it out in public isn't going to fix your marriage. I'm not trying to fix my marriage, Sam. I'm trying to end it with some dignity intact. Dignity? Lana laughed harshly. You humiliated your wife in front of half the city. Where's the dignity in that? Ask me that question again after you read her text messages about how boring and pathetic she thinks I am. Ask me about dignity after you see the receipts for hotels and restaurants where she was planning our divorce while having closeness with another woman's husband. The group fell silent. Even Lana seemed taken aback by the bitterness in my voice. Marissa stepped forward, reaching for my hand. Caleb, please. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry. But we can work through this. We can go to counseling, rebuild our trust. Don't throw away 8 years of marriage over a few months of confusion. For a moment, I almost wavered. She was beautiful, she was apologetic, and part of me wanted to believe that our marriage could be salvaged. But then I remembered the cold calculation in her text messages, the way she'd mocked me to her lover, and the detailed plans she'd made to destroy me financially. It's too late for that, Marissa. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't worth being faithful to. Now I'm making mine. I turned to go back into my house, but Sam grabbed my arm. What's that supposed to mean? What are you planning to do? I looked at my brother, noting the genuine concern in his eyes. Sam had always been the charmer, the one everyone loved, but he'd also always been protective of family. I'm planning to move on with my life, and I'm planning to make sure that everyone who helped destroy my marriage understands that there are consequences for their actions. That sounds like a threat, Lana said. It's not a threat. It's a promise. I went back into my house and locked the door behind me, leaving the 3 of them standing in my driveway. Through the window, I watched them have an animated discussion before finally getting into their respective cars and driving away. My phone buzzed with a text from Marissa. This isn't over. You're going to regret this. I typed back, I already regret it. I regret marrying you in the first place. But as I sat in my kitchen that night, planning my next move, I realized that regret was a luxury I could no longer afford. Marissa and Brent had declared war on my life, and I was finally ready to fight back. The real battle was just beginning. The Riverside Towers penthouse was supposed to be Brent's crowning achievement, a luxury development project that would cement his reputation as the city's premier developer. The The building's top floor was being staged for a high-profile open house event, with potential buyers flying in from Boston and New York to view what the marketing materials called the pinnacle of coastal living. Marissa was handling the staging, of course. It was supposed to be her professional triumph as well, the project that would establish her as the go-to luxury stager for high-end developments. The irony wasn't lost on me that their affair had begun over what they both hoped would be their greatest success. I learned about the event from Mrs. Graham, who'd seen the announcement in the society pages of the local newspaper. "Quite the fancy affair," she'd commented during our morning coffee conversation. "Invitation only, champagne and catered hors d'oeuvres, city officials, and business leaders. The kind of event where reputations are made or broken." She was more right than she knew. I'd spent the week since our driveway confrontation making careful preparations. Bank accounts had been separated, credit cards had been canceled, and I'd retained a divorce attorney who specialized in cases involving adultery and financial misconduct. The legal paperwork was already in motion, but I wanted something more immediate than a court settlement. I wanted justice. The open house was scheduled for Friday evening, 7 to 9 p.m. I arrived at 6:30 and positioned myself in the coffee shop across the street, watching as catering trucks and florists made their final preparations. The building's lobby was decorated with enormous flower arrangements and elegant signage directing guests to the penthouse elevator. At 7:15, I made my move. The building's security was minimal. A single guard at the front desk who was more focused on directing guests than checking credentials. I walked in wearing my best suit and carrying a leather portfolio, looking like any other potential buyer or business associate. "Good evening," I said to the security guard. "I'm here for the Riverside Towers event." He barely looked up from his clipboard. "Penthouse level, elevator bank B. Enjoy the evening." The penthouse was everything the marketing materials had promised: floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, imported marble floors, and enough space to house a small hotel. Marissa had outdone herself with the staging. Every piece of furniture was perfectly positioned, every decorative element was precisely placed, and the overall effect was one of effortless luxury. The guest list was exactly what I'd expected: city council members, local business leaders, real estate agents, and wealthy potential buyers. Everyone was dressed in their finest clothes, sipping champagne and discussing property values and investment opportunities. Marissa was holding court near the floor-to-ceiling windows, explaining the staging concept to a group of potential buyers. She looked stunning in a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup was flawless, and she radiated the kind of confidence that came from knowing she was the center of attention. Brent was across the room, discussing architectural details with what looked like a group of investors. He'd recovered some of his composure since our last conversation, though I could see the strain around his eyes and the way he kept checking his phone. I helped myself to a glass of champagne and began circulating through the crowd, listening to conversations and waiting for the right moment. Several people recognized me. The insurance industry was small in our city, and I'd handled claims for many of the businesses represented at the event. "Caleb Turner," called out Jim Morrison, who owned a chain of local restaurants. "What brings you to this fancy affair? Looking to upgrade from the old neighborhood?" "Just curious about the local real estate market," I said. "I might be in the market for a new place soon." "Divorce will do that to a man," he said with a knowing laugh. "I went through one myself 5 years ago. Best thing that ever happened to me, financially speaking. Sometimes you have to cut your losses and start fresh." The comment was louder than necessary, and I saw several heads turn in our direction. Word of my marital troubles had clearly spread through the business community. "Speaking of divorce," I said, raising my voice slightly, "has anyone here worked with Brent Dale's development company? I'm considering hiring them for a project, but I like to check references first." The question created a small stir of interest. Several people began sharing their experiences with Dale Development, most of them positive. Brent was well regarded in the business community, known for quality work and professional service. "Brent's solid," said Margaret Chen, a local real estate agent. "Always delivers on time, always within budget. Very professional operation." "That's good to hear," I said. I was a little concerned about some rumors I'd heard regarding his personal life, but I suppose that's not really relevant to business matters. The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Margaret's expression shifted from casual interest to curiosity. "What kind of rumors?" Before I could answer, Marissa appeared at my elbow. She'd clearly been watching me from across the room and had decided to intervene before I could cause any more damage. "Caleb," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger, "what a surprise to see you here. I didn't realize you were interested in luxury real estate." "I'm interested in a lot of things lately," I replied. "Amazing what you discover when you start paying attention to details." "Perhaps we should discuss this privately," she said, grabbing my arm and trying to steer me away from the group. I didn't resist, but I also didn't lower my voice. I don't think there's anything private about this situation anymore, Marissa. After all, you've been very public about your professional relationships. The nearby conversations had stopped, and I could feel the attention of the room beginning to focus on our exchange. Brent noticed the disturbance and started walking in our direction, his face pale with concern. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, raising my champagne glass and projecting my voice across the room, I'd like to propose a toast to successful partnerships. The room fell silent. Even the catering staff stopped what they were doing to listen. My wife, Marissa, and Brent Dale have formed quite the partnership over the past few months. They've worked very closely together on this project, spending countless hours in hotels and restaurants, planning every detail of their collaboration. Marissa's grip on my arm tightened. Caleb, stop this right now. They've been so dedicated to their work that they've been meeting at all hours, sometimes even on weekends. A very hands-on approach to business. Brent had reached our group and was standing frozen, his face cycling through various shades of red and white. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. In fact, I have some documentation of their partnership right here, receipts, photographs, text messages, a complete record of their professional collaboration. The room was completely silent now. I could hear the sound of traffic from the street below and the distant hum of the building's air conditioning system. Caleb, Brent said quietly, please don't do this. Don't do what, Brent? Share information about a business partnership? I thought you'd be proud of your work together. I opened the envelope and pulled out several printed photographs, the hotel selfies I'd found on Marissa's hidden phone, carefully edited to remove the most explicit content, but leaving enough to make the situation unmistakably clear. Here's a photo from their business meeting at the Marriott last month, and here's one from their working dinner in Portland. Very thorough documentation of their professional relationship. I handed the photos to Jim Morrison, who studied them with growing amazement before passing them to Margaret Chen. The images began circulating through the crowd like wildfire. Marissa released my arm and stepped backward, her face white with shock and humiliation. Those are private photographs. You had no right— Private, I interrupted. You took them on a phone that was paid for with our joint bank account during trips that were charged to our joint credit cards, while you were supposed to be working on projects that were billed to our joint business expenses. Nothing about this situation is private. Brent tried to intervene. This is a misunderstanding. Those photos are taken out of context. Context? I pulled out my phone and opened the audio recording app. Would you like me to provide some context? I have voicemails, text messages, detailed planning sessions for your future together, including some very specific discussions about how to handle your respective divorces. The crowd was pressing closer now, drawn by the spectacle of watching two prominent members of the business community being publicly destroyed. Several people were taking photos with their phones, and I could see the gleam of social media documentation in their eyes. Please, Marissa whispered, tears starting to form. Please don't do this to us. I looked at her carefully, noting the way her perfect facade was finally cracking. For 8 years, she'd been the beautiful, ambitious wife who'd pushed me to be more successful, more social, more worthy of her attention. Now she was just another cheating spouse begging for mercy she hadn't shown to others. You did this to yourselves, I said quietly. I'm just making sure everyone understands what really happened. Brent made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Whatever you want, we can work it out. Money, property, business opportunities, we can make this right. You can't make this right, Brent. You can't undo 3 months of lies and betrayal and manipulation. You can't give me back the marriage I thought I had or the trust I thought I could count on. I finished my champagne and set the glass down on a nearby table, but you can live with the consequences of your choices, both of you. I walked toward the elevator, leaving them standing in the middle of a room full of their peers, colleagues, and potential business partners. The photos were still circulating through the crowd, and I could hear the beginning of animated conversations about what they'd just witnessed. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a final glimpse of Marissa and Brent standing together in the ruins of their professional reputations, finally understanding that some betrayals come with a price that can't be negotiated or explained away. The next morning, my phone was full of messages from friends, family members, and business associates who'd heard about the previous evening's events. The story had spread through the city's social networks with the speed of a wildfire, growing and evolving with each retelling. But the most important message was from my divorce attorney. Settlement documents signed this morning. She agreed to all terms without negotiation. Congratulations on your freedom. I sat in my kitchen, drinking coffee and watching the sunrise through my window. For the first time in months, the house felt peaceful. There were no more lies to uncover, no more evidence to gather, no more confrontations to plan. Marissa had moved out during the night, taking only her personal belongings and leaving behind the life we'd built together. Brent's development company was already facing canceled contracts and investor withdrawals. Their affair had cost them everything they'd worked to achieve. Some people might call it revenge. I preferred to think of it as justice, the natural consequence of choices made and prices paid. Mrs. Graham appeared at my kitchen window right on schedule, carrying her morning coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose predictions had proven accurate. "Well," she said when I opened the door, "I suppose that's the end of that particular drama." "I suppose it is. Any regrets?" I thought about the question seriously. 8 years of marriage, gone. A social circle that would never quite look at me the same way. A reputation for being the man who'd publicly destroyed his cheating wife and her lover. "None," I said finally. "Some stains you just can't clean, some people either."